Kerry with K&L Wine Merchants, and right now we're at our San Francisco store, and we're with Clyde Jr., the co-founder of K&L Wine Merchants, which was founded in 1976. And right now we're going to have a Bordeaux tasting, which one of the great things about our 3 locations is that there are a lot of tastings that you can come to on the weekends. Check out on our website. There's a tab that says local events, and you can see what we're tasting. And it's a great opportunity to learn about wines. And if you ever get a chance to taste with Clyde, never miss that opportunity, because you stand a chance to learn a lot. He's been in the business a long time. So let's...
Well, like Woody Allen says, if you stick around long enough, people think you know what you're talking about. That might not necessarily be true, but anyway. The wine business is fun. It's much more fun than my previous business of milking cows in a dairy. And we're doing a tasting here of what I consider the best vintages of the last 15 years from Bordeaux. We've got some samples here. And then a couple older bottles over on the side that people guess, and if they get it close, they get a bottle of wine. But, I love Bordeaux. To the point where 95% of my cellar is Bordeaux, so I don't have too much. I like California wines a lot. I drink a lot of Burgundy. I love Burgundies. I can't afford them too much, but and Bordeaux's getting expensive too. But I think some of these are really good values, especially the wines from Domaine de Chèvre, Léoville-Barton. Kind of my 5 of these are my favorite chateaus. Okay, that I collect quite a bit of. Then we have a Troplong Mondot here, which actually is showing 16% alcohol on the label, the 2010. But I can't pick up the 10. It doesn't taste like 16%. Okay, but they were honest, and usually somebody would put 15.5 on that label, but 16. But it's delicious wine. It's like 100 points from Parker. This will be fun.
Stand by for this one. It'll be very interesting to discuss with that level of alcohol. I can't wait to try it.
Yeah, and right bank versus the Madoff and the left bank and all that. So, are we going to taste here?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Are you going to pour some for yourself? Domaine de Chèvre. I love this property. It's in the south, in the Pessac-Legonon area, Graves area. So it's not up in the Médoc where Pauillac, Saint-Julien are. And we're tasting wines from several different regions. But Domaine de Chèvre is one of the best value wines, and they make a great white wine too. 2016 was, to me, one of the best vintages, like the 3rd best vintage since 09. 09, 10 being the first 2 top ones, and then 16. The wine is very earthy in the nose, a little gravelly, and it actually is quite a bit of Merlot in here, 35%.
Oh God, you're good. One thing I love about a back label like this is it gives you the breakdown. So you called it 35% Merlot, 55% Cab, 5% Cab Franc, 5% Petit Verdot.
You don't find that on too many labels in Bordeaux, mainly because they make up a lot of labels, and it changes every year. The vintage changes on the percentages, but this one was specific for this wine. If you would go to ask Anthony Barton about his wine from Saint-Julien, Leoville, and Langoa, his big comment was, "Well, this year they were 100% grapes." So it's. He doesn't believe in the percentages and stuff like that, and they would have to change the back label every time because every year it's a different percentage. But they had it on that label. The wine is wonderful. 15 vintage is famous for down in that area, but this wine is just making value wines. This wine is under $100, which is a value now in Bordeaux to find a great wine that's going to age for a long time. They make, like I said, a very expensive white wine that's very good. This property is probably the most susceptible to frost in all of the Médoc. And in 1985, it lost all its Merlot vines. They died. It was so cold. It's surrounded by a forest, and then, so after 1985, it was all Cabernet for about 5 or 6 years before they could get some more Merlot coming. But now it's got 35% Merlot, and Merlot does really well down there. So, I mean, it's still young, and I'll get a glass here. But it has that sweetness too in the middle, the palate.
Beautiful finish.
A few more years.
I love the minerality in that.
Grand Puy Lacoste, a property that is Pauillac. It's from Pauillac, which is kind of the famous. When people talk about Pauillac, why do they say it's the most famous? Because that's where Château Latour is, Château Lafitte, and Château Mouton, 3 first growths. Grand Puy Lacoste is quite close to them. It's definitely a classified growth. It's not a second growth, but makes really good wines. The Bory family owns this property back then. Xavier Bory, his brother Bruno Bory owns Ducru, and Xavier just used to own Eau Bataille, but just sold it to Lynchbage people. So Grand Puy Lacoste, Pauillac in 16. I'm having 3 16s right here because I think there's a great vintages. And Pauillac in 16, some of the best wines come from Pauillac and Saint-Estèphe. It's a North made out vintage, great Cabernet vintage.
That's a gorgeous nose on that.
It's got
pretty.
It's got some red fruits, and it's got some iron and a little cocoa in there. You know, a little bit of coconut.
Oh, that's beautiful.
But like 16, on the palate, it's pretty strong.
Blackberry cocoa, and I do get that iron in the finish.
Yeah, right at the finish there. Like our water at home, a little bit of iron in it. But the next wine that we have is, of course, everybody knows one of my favorites, Anthony Barton, Leoville-Barton. 16. The 3 famous Leovilles are Poifferet, Barton, and Lascasse. Barton is second growth. Saint Julien, a great area just south of Pauillac. So the wines tend to be good when it's a north vintage and good when it's a southern vintage because they're close to Mardiaux too. But this wine scored number 1 Wine Spectator, top wine of the year. And we sold a lot of this wine right after it gets number 1. You know, we usually sell quite a bit of the wine. And now it's selling for about $169. It's big wine. This one has, to me, a little bit of graphite in it too. Graphite, and a little bit of cola in the back, and some cassis.
Now, where does the graphite come from? Because I noticed that's a common note in Bordeaux.
That in Lynchbage does a lot. I'm not sure. I didn't do well in my soils engineering classes at Davis. But
yeah, I was wondering if it's varietal or
it
or
could
soil.
be. This wine is probably 90% Cabernet, even though Anthony Barton says it's 100% grapes. But the wine is lovely, but it's still 16s need time. I mean, these wines need 20, 30 years to really come around for a great vintage like this. And I don't have 20 or 30 more years. You do, but
no, I keep thinking that. And that's the thing. How do you decide when to drink these? How do you know?
Yeah, well, who you're going to have and where you're going to do it, and then make sure you decant it, especially when they're young like this. I mean, Burgundy, they don't like to decant. I disagree with that. I think decanting, not just necessarily for the sediment, just for the air. And it's interesting. We just got back from Paris, and the great wine shops in France, they always decant the great white wines, but rarely the red wines, you know, just to give white wine air, okay? But we're only doing it for air, not because the sediment's not going to bother you on this wine, but just to, you know, make it more evolved. It's so many wines that are drunk too young. You know, you go to a restaurant wine list, and they have 2020 Montelena's in. I love Montelena. You know, I love their wines. But 2020 is maybe a little bit too young to drink with your nice rack of lamb. But they can't afford to have extensive wine lists with older wines. So if you bring a bottle, make sure you taste it before you bring it. You don't want to bring a corked bottle because then you're going to be stuck and then you're going to have to buy something over the list. So taste the wine, Coravan it or whatever, you open it ahead of time before you take it to a good restaurant.
See, this is why you don't want to miss tastings with Clyde, or you get these really awesome gems of knowledge, stuff like that.
We're going to skip way down now to old wine, and we're going to go there. Not old, Labegorce, which is one of K&L's favorite properties. It's in Margaux, so the wines in Margaux tend to be a little bit more elegant. Labegorce is right next to Château Margaux. A real good golfer could probably hit his drive from the center of Labegorce to Margaux. Okay, and the wines are not very well known, but in the last few years they've been taken over by this oil company owner, and they put a lot of money into the properties. It's kind of old school Bordeaux. We drank last week at the party, K&L party in Redwood City. I brought a 2001 Labegorce in a double magnum. It's a wonderful wine. But these are old school Bordeaux wines, okay? These are not fancy, lots of new oak and everything like that. 05 is a big, powerful vintage. But the nose on this Labegorce 05, I think, is just wonderful. And the wine is like $69, so it's 17 years old, 18 years old. I just love this nose of Margaux, and you have some like lavender. Good enough to drink. But
Lavender cassis, beautiful.
Yeah, but it's still got that power. The 05 still has that little power in the back, a little bit of tannic back. This wine, after decanting, though, should be fantastic with maybe a pork roast or something like that. But good value. Then I'm going to go to 09, my favorite vintage, and it's a controversial because the favorite vintages of most wine people in the last 20 years are 9 and 10. Invariably, the younger people, like my son or Alex Prosser, would like the 010 wine. They call it 010. It's 10, but it's 010, okay? And I like 09. Ralph and I, because the older people like the 09s are sexier, they're very voluptuous, they're ripe. They're like 1929, 1953. When people said, oh, those wines, like 82, those wines are too sweet, they're never going to age. You know what? This wine will keep going and going and going. It tastes good now. It's going to taste good for a long time. It's one thing about if you taste a wine and you don't think it tastes very good now, not because it's just too young, but it just doesn't. If a wine doesn't taste good when it's young, it's not going to taste good when it's old. Okay, so start out with something that tastes good when it's young, and you got a good chance it'll taste good when it's old too. So, but I think this nose is wonderful on this wine. This has got that cola thing, like Langoa. This is a picture. The Langoa wine has that label, but that's Langoa. Even though it's on the Leoville-Barton label, the Leoville-Barton Chateau is kind of like a house. Langoa is the main.
I get cola, but I also get like walking into a humidor. Beautiful.
Mm-hmm. A little cigar.
What a sweetness.
And the mid palate, you have that round sweetness of 09. It doesn't have that harsh tannin, but underneath there's lots of tannin in this wine. It's just the fruit covers the tannins. Okay. I like it. At my age, I want the fruit to cover the tannins. I don't want the tannins to cover the fruit.
And isn't that interesting how your palate ages and your preference change over time?
Amazing, because I was a left bank guy. In fact, all the people that worked here for years, Ralph and Brian and Sean, they've worked here for 20, 30 years. So, Clyde, you never had right bank. The only thing you ever carried right bank was Cheval Blanc, And I go, I think I drink a lot of right bank wine now, so because they're easier to drink, soft, fruity, and they can mature a little bit earlier. This wine can go for a long time. Troplong Mondot. It's a beautiful property. I remember when they were, years ago, when they were putting in their first swimming pool. I think it was in 1988 or say 87 we were there. And Christine Villette, who was related to John Paul Villette, who owned Pavie. Pavie is just right below Troplong. Troplong is on the top of the hill next to the water tower, looking at Saint-Emilion. So prime area. Just been rebought by a consortium, and they're redoing the property. They put a lot of money in. It's a great restaurant. Unfortunately, when we went there 2 years ago, it wasn't open because we didn't get there. We got there too late. But anyway, and they have rooms. So go to Troplong Mondot for the food and also the wine. And they're doing a great job. This is 2010. Now this is the controversial 9 versus 10. But this is right bank 10, so it's sweet. Okay, most of the right bank, the left bank 10s are a little more tannic and sturdy. This wine is pretty good right now. It's quite lush.
Do you think the high alcohol affects ageability at all?
It's very interesting because we don't know that, because the high alcohol wines came through in the 70s, late 70s, when it was kind of fashionable to drink California's late harvest inns and stuff like that, and or bigger wines. And then the garage wines of the 90s. I don't know how they're going to do, because let's face it, the wines from 28, 29, which I consider, and 45, the three greatest vintages of the 20th century, don't have that high alcohol. They have 13 at max, 12 and a half. They don't have any new barrels. They just made wine, So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Bordeaux and how these high alcohol wines. This one doesn't show the alcohol.
Not at all.
No.
I don't get any ethanol burn or any.
No.
It's balanced.
It's so sweet, and it's 10 vintage. The wine is lovely wine. It's not cheap, $200. And I think Parker said it was. Robert Parker, to me, was the best wine critic ever. He retired after this vintage in 10 from Bordeaux.
I love the violets. I'm getting a lot of when I get that violet note. Oh.
Mm-hmm. About 90% Merlot. Troplong, watch Troplong Mondot. The wines are $19.20. They're reasonably priced at less than about $100 a bottle. Their wines, they're first growth quality. Okay, top of the line. Don't forget them. They're doing a great job. If you want to taste something old,
Of course.
yep. I just brought this from home. 83 Meyney. We served this wine at. We just got this in stock. We served this wine at the party in Redwood City the other night with the Labegorce open. Snagged them. Meyney, great property. It's kind of the Rodney Dangerfield of Saint Estèphe, because it's not Calon-Ségur, it's not Montrose, it's not Cozes-Tournelle, it's not even Lafon Rocher or Félon-Ségur. But Meyney just sits out there by itself looking at the estuary, right near Montrose. So it's got perfect terroir, great area. This is, what's this, 40 years old now, 40?
Who knows?
The wine is not bad. I just got in all these old big bottles of Meyney, 94, 97. We're a master of the old and not so famous vintages because the wines really taste good and they're affordable. I thought this 83 was doing really well. So I brought one from home today just to have it very tasty.
Definitely different than the others as far as that wild nose.
Yeah. It's a little bit short in the finish, but it just got opened. Those bottles have been opened a little bit earlier, so I would say this wine, after about another hour opening or decanting, I would love to have this wine with a nice piece of like a rack of lamb or something like that. I'm getting hungry.
Yeah, lamb or something with mushrooms.
Yeah. 'Cause it has
Definitely
a little,
game.
it has that little bit of mushroom. Venison.
Oh, venison. Venison medallion, lovely.
So,
All right, thank
it.
you so much, Clyde. This was awesome. So, if you enjoyed this video, please hit like and subscribe, and check out the K&L Wines website, which I'll put a link at the bottom. And thank you so much, Clyde, and happy birthday!
thank you.
All right,
Thanks.
cheers.